My dad praised my sister. He said she saved us from foreclosure. I smiled and said, "Then, who sent you $100,000? My name is Stella, and I am 32 years old." I always believed that family was the one place where your sacrifices would be seen, where your love would be returned. But on my father's 63rd birthday, when he stood up at the dinner table and raised his glass to thank my sister Harper for saving our family home, I realized I had been wrong my entire life. I just smiled and asked one simple question that made the whole room go silent. Before we dive into this story, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. If you believe that the truth always finds its way to the surface, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you are going to want to hear how this unfolds. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, and secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. But somehow, the secret of my invisibility within my own family managed to stay buried for decades. My mother passed away from breast cancer when I was just 7 years old. Harper was 9 at the time. I remember the funeral in fragments, the smell of lilies, the sound of my father sobbing, the way Harper clung to his hand while I stood alone by the casket, not quite understanding that Mama was never coming back. From that day forward, something shifted in our home. My father looked at Harper and saw my mother's ghost. She had inherited Mama's wavy brown hair, her bright smile, her easy charm. Every time Dad looked at Harper, I could see the softness in his eyes, the way his face relaxed, like he was seeing a piece of his wife still alive in this world. And then there was me. I had straight black hair, quiet eyes, and a personality that preferred books to conversation. I looked like my father's side of the family, the side he never talked about much. When he looked at me, I never saw that same softness. I saw obligation, maybe duty, but never that pure, unconditional love he reserved for my sister. The first time I truly understood the difference in how we were treated, I was 12 years old. I had just won first place in the state math competition, a huge achievement that my teacher said could help me get scholarships for college someday. The awards ceremony was on a Saturday afternoon, and I had reminded my father about it 3 times that week. He forgot to come. He was busy taking Harper to buy a new dress for her friend's birthday party. When I stood on that stage to receive my trophy, I scanned the audience desperately, hoping to see his face somewhere in the crowd. Instead, I found rows of strangers, other parents beaming at their own children, and one empty seat where my father should have been. My teacher, Mrs. Patterson, noticed that no one had come for me. She called our neighbor, Mrs. Hendricks, who drove over to pick me up. On the ride home, Mrs. Hendricks kept telling me how proud she was, how I was going to do great things someday. I smiled and said thank you, but inside, I felt hollow. That night at dinner, no one mentioned my award. Harper talked about the dress she bought, a pink one, with sequins that she planned to wear to the party. Dad listened with complete attention, asking about her friends, about what games they would play, about whether she wanted him to drive her, or if she preferred to get a ride with someone else. I ate my mashed potatoes in silence, the trophy sitting in my backpack, never to be displayed on any shelf in our home. 3 years after my mother's death, my father remarried. Diane was a soft-spoken woman who worked part-time as an administrative assistant at the local hospital. She was kind to both Harper and me, always making sure we had clean clothes and hot meals, always asking about our days at school. I had hoped, perhaps naively, that having a new woman in the house might balance things out. Maybe Diane would notice the disparity between how Harper and I were treated. Maybe she would advocate for me, help my father see that he had 2 daughters, not just one. But Diane was not a fighter. She had grown up in a home where women did not challenge their husbands, where keeping the peace was more important than speaking the truth. She saw the way Dad favored Harper. I am certain of that now, but she never said a word. She chose silence to preserve harmony, not realizing that her silence was its own kind of wound. Harper, meanwhile, learned early that tears and sweet words could get her anything she wanted. When she broke curfew, she cried, and Dad forgave her. When she failed a class, she blamed the teacher, and Dad believed her. When she wanted money for clothes, for trips, for whatever caught her fancy, she simply asked with a smile, and the cash appeared. I watched and learned a different lesson. I learned that I could not rely on anyone but myself. I studied harder, worked more, asked for less. By the time I was 16, I had a part-time job at the local library, saving every dollar for college. I told myself that someday my hard work would pay off. Someday my father would see me. When I was 18, I received a full scholarship to the University of Washington in Seattle. It was the proudest moment of my life up to that point. I had done it entirely on my own, no help from tutors, no expensive prep courses, just me and my determination, and countless nights studying while Harper was out with friends. I remember the day I told my father. I came downstairs with the acceptance letter in my hand, my heart pounding with excitement. Harper was sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone while Dad read the newspaper. "Dad, I said I got in, full scholarship, to the University of Washington." He looked up, nodded once, and said, "Good for you." Then he turned to Harper and asked, "So, have you decided where you want to go for your gap year?" I was thinking maybe Europe would be nice. That was it. No congratulations, no hug, no celebration. Just a single nod, and then the spotlight returned to Harper, who had decided that college was not for her, that she needed to find herself by traveling the world on Dad's dime. Seattle became my sanctuary. I threw myself into my studies, majoring in computer science, a field where logic and hard work were rewarded regardless of who your family was. I worked 3 part-time jobs to cover my living expenses. Because even with the scholarship, there were costs that needed to be paid. There were nights when I ate nothing but instant noodles for a week straight. There were mornings when I dragged myself to class on 2 hours of sleep because I had been up late working the night shift at a coffee shop. But I never complained, and I never asked my family for a single dollar. Meanwhile, Harper returned from her gap year with nothing but Instagram photos and a tan. She announced that she was going to become an entrepreneur, that she had all these amazing ideas that would make her rich. Dad, ever supportive of his golden child, gave her $50,000 to start her first business, an online clothing boutique. It failed within 6 months. Harper blamed the economy, said the market was too saturated, insisted that her suppliers had been unreliable. Dad believed every word and gave her another $30,000 to start a bakery. That lasted 8 months before the doors closed permanently. Then came the event planning company, then a brief stint as a life coach, then an attempt at becoming an influencer. Each venture crashed and burned, and each time Harper had an excuse ready: bad timing, dishonest partners, unforeseen circumstances. Never once did she take responsibility. Never once did Dad question where all his money was going. When I was 23, fresh out of college, with my first real job as a junior software developer, Harper called me. Her voice was sweet as honey, the same voice she used whenever she wanted something. "Stella," she said, "I have this amazing opportunity, but I just need a little help getting started. Could you lend me $5,000? I promise I will pay you back within 3 months." I told her no. I explained that I had student loans to pay off, that I was barely making ends meet myself, that I could not afford to give away money I did not have. Her sweetness evaporated instantly. She called me selfish, said I had always been jealous of her, accused me of wanting her to fail. Then she hung up on me. 2 weeks later, I learned that Dad had given her the money anyway. Of course he had. Over the next 5 years, I climbed the ladder at my company. I went from junior developer to mid-level engineer to senior engineer. I got raises, bonuses, stock options. I paid off my student loans, bought a small apartment in Seattle, started building a real nest egg for the first time in my life. Every time I called home, Dad would ask about my job in the same tone he might ask about the weather, mildly curious, quickly distracted. Then he would spend the next 20 minutes telling me about Harper's latest project, Harper's latest struggle, Harper's latest excuse for needing more money. I stopped calling as often. It hurt less that way. Harper married Blake 2 years ago. They had met at a bar, dated for 6 months, and then decided to get married in a ceremony that cost over $40,000. Dad paid for the entire thing without hesitation. I was invited to be a bridesmaid, but I had to buy my own dress book, my own flight pay for my own hotel room. At the wedding, during his toast, Dad said that Harper was the greatest joy of his life, that he could not be prouder of the woman she had become. I sat at a corner table with my expensive dress and my fake smile, wondering if I would ever hear him say anything even close to that about me. That night, after the reception ended, I walked alone to my rental car in the parking lot. The stars were out. The air was warm, and I felt more alone than I had ever felt in my entire life. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, not crying, just thinking. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to earn my father's love, all the sacrifices I had made, all the times I had excelled and been met with indifference. And I wondered if maybe the problem was not that I was not good enough. Maybe the problem was that I was trying to earn something that should have been given freely. The phone call came on a Tuesday night in March, sometime around 11 o'clock. I had just finished a long day at work and was getting ready for bed when I saw Diane's name on my screen. She rarely called me and never this late. My stomach tightened as I answered. "Stella," her voice was trembling in a way I had never heard before. "I need to tell you something. Your father, he has been keeping something from everyone. We are in trouble. Real trouble." She told me everything. For the past 6 months, Dad had failed to make the mortgage payments on the house. The bank had sent warning after warning, and now they had issued a foreclosure notice. The family had 90 days to pay $100,000, or the house would be taken. I sat down on the edge of my bed, my mind racing. $100,000. That was almost everything I had saved over the past 5 years of working myself to the bone. How did this happen, I asked, though. Deep down, I already knew the answer. Diane hesitated before responding. "Your father, he withdrew from his retirement accounts. Over the past few years, he gave it all to Harper for her businesses. More than $200,000, Stella. It is all gone." I closed my eyes and felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. Of course that was what had happened. Dad had drained his future to fund Harper's failures, and now the whole family was paying the price. "She does not know that I know," Diane continued. "And your father, he does not know that I am telling you. He would be furious if he found out. But I did not know who else to call. I did not know what else to do. I told Diane I needed time to think, then hung up the phone and stared at the ceiling for a long time. A few days later, Dad called a family meeting over video chat. Harper was there with Blake, both of them looking appropriately concerned. Dad explained the situation, though he conveniently left out the part about where all his retirement money had gone. He said the bank was demanding payment, that we might lose the house, that he did not know what to do. Harper started crying, saying that she and Blake were struggling too, that Blake's hours had been cut at work, that they barely had enough to pay their own rent. She said she wished she could help, but she just did not have the resources. Dad looked at me through the screen. His eyes held something I had rarely seen before: expectation. He did not ask directly, but the implication hung heavy in the silence. I told them I needed time to consider my options and ended the call. That night, I called Marcus, my best friend from college. He was a lawyer now working at a firm downtown, and he had always been the one person who told me the truth, even when I did not want to hear it. "Are you seriously considering bailing them out?" he asked, his voice incredulous. "Stella, your family has never done anything for you. Your dad has spent your entire life pretending you do not exist while throwing money at Harper like she is some kind of charity case. And now, when they are in trouble because of her, they expect you to fix it." "I know," I said. "Trust me, I know all of that." "Then why are you even considering it?" I was quiet for a moment, trying to find the right words. "Because it is not about Dad, and it is not about Harper. It is about the house, Marcus. That is where my mom lived her last days. That is where she planted her garden, the one Diane still takes care of. If I let them lose that house, I am letting them lose the last piece of her that still exists." Marcus sighed heavily. "You are a better person than they deserve, you know that." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I just need to know that I did the right thing, even if they never see it." I made my decision that night. I would pay off the mortgage, but I would do it my way. No checks written to Dad, no cash handed to Harper. I would transfer the money directly to the bank, ensuring that it went exactly where it needed to go and nowhere else. But I would not tell anyone. Not Dad, not Harper, not even Diane. I wanted to see what would happen when the crisis was resolved. I wanted to know who would take credit and who would tell the truth. I contacted the bank the next day and arranged the wire transfer. $100,000, nearly everything I had saved over 5 years of hard work. I watched the number leave my account and felt a strange mix of grief and liberation. Before I finalized everything, I asked the bank to send me confirmation of the payment. I wanted receipts, email trails, every piece of documentation they could provide. Something in my gut told me I might need it someday. A week after the transfer, Diane called me again. This time, her voice was lighter, almost cheerful. "Stella, the most wonderful news. The bank called today. They said the mortgage has been paid off." "Can you believe it? Paid in full, just like that?" I kept my voice neutral. "That is great, Diane. How did that happen?" "Well," Diane paused, "your father thinks he believes Harper must have found a way. She has been telling everyone that she and Blake managed to scrape together the money somehow, that they sold some things and borrowed from friends. Your dad is so proud of her. He keeps saying she saved the family. I gripped the phone tighter, but kept my voice calm. Is that so? He wants to do something special, Diane continued, for his birthday next month. A family dinner where he can officially thank Harper in front of everyone. He has already invited your aunt and uncle, the cousins, everybody. He wants the whole family to know what she did for us. I see, I said. Well, that sounds like quite an event. You will come, won't you? Diane sounded almost pleading. I know things have been complicated between you and your father, but it would mean a lot to have you here. I looked at the stack of bank documents sitting on my desk. Yes, Diane, I will be there. I would not miss it for the world. In the weeks leading up to my father's birthday dinner, the story of Harper's heroic sacrifice spread through our extended family like wildfire. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from relatives I had not heard from in years. Aunt Lydia texted me saying she always knew Harper had a heart of gold, that she was proud of how the young woman had stepped up when the family needed her most. Uncle Gerald left a voicemail praising Harper's entrepreneurial spirit, saying it clearly ran in the family. Even distant cousin Nathan, who I had not seen since I was a teenager, reached out to share his admiration for my sister's selfless act. I read each message with a growing sense of disbelief. Harper, who had drained $200,000 from our father's retirement accounts. Harper, who had never held a steady job or seen a single business succeed. Harper, who had called me selfish for refusing to lend her $5,000 while she had already taken enough from our family to buy a house. That Harper was now being celebrated as the family savior. The most painful message came from Aunt Martha, my mother's sister. She wrote a long emotional text about how proud my mother would have been of Harper, how this act of generosity proved that Harper had inherited Mama's giving spirit. Reading those words felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until I could not breathe. I called Diane again, needing to understand exactly what story Harper had been telling. Diane hesitated before answering, her voice dropping to a whisper, as if she was afraid of being overheard. She told everyone that she and Blake borrowed from all their friends, maxed out their credit cards, even sold her engagement ring. She said they had been making calls for weeks, begging people for loans, and they managed to piece together just enough to save the house. Your father cried when she told him Stella, actually cried. And no one questioned it, I asked. No one asked for proof. Why would they? Diane replied sadly. Harper has always been good at making people believe her. And your father wanted to believe. You know how much he loves that girl. Finding out she saved the house that she sacrificed for him after everything he gave her. It was exactly what he wanted to hear. I spent a long time that night sitting alone in my apartment, staring at the documents spread across my kitchen table. The wire transfer confirmation. The emails from the bank acknowledging receipt of payment, the account statements showing my savings plummeting from 6 figures to almost nothing. I thought about what Marcus had said about how my family had never done anything for me. He was right, of course. Dad had barely acknowledged my existence for 32 years. Harper had taken and taken without ever giving back. They did not deserve my help, and they certainly did not deserve the truth. But this was not about what they deserved. This was about what I deserved. I had spent my entire life being invisible, watching someone else take credit for things they did not do, accepting that my contributions would never be seen or valued. And now here was the ultimate test. Would I let the biggest sacrifice I had ever made be stolen from me without saying a word? The answer came to me with surprising clarity. No, I would not. But I also would not confront Harper privately, where she could twist the narrative or come up with new lies. I would not give Dad a chance to explain it away or pretend there was some misunderstanding. I wanted the truth to come out in front of everyone at the exact moment when Harper's lie was being celebrated most loudly. I thought about the birthday dinner, the family gathering where Harper would be publicly thanked and praised. That would be the moment. When everyone was watching, when there was no escape and no excuses, I would ask one simple question and let the truth speak for itself. Marcus called me a few days before my flight back to Ohio. Are you sure you want to do this? He asked. Once you pull that trigger, there is no going back. Your relationship with your father, with Harper, with your whole family, it could be destroyed permanently. I looked out my window at the Seattle skyline, the city that had become my real home over the past decade. What relationship, Marcus? You cannot destroy something that never existed. Dad never saw me. Harper never respected me. The only difference after this dinner is that they will have to acknowledge that I exist even if they hate me for it. He was quiet for a long moment. Do you want me to come with you? For moral support? I smiled, touched by the offer. No, this is something I need to do alone. But thank you, Marcus, for everything. The night before my flight, I packed my suitcase with care. A simple black dress, comfortable shoes, minimal makeup. I was not trying to impress anyone. I was not trying to compete with Harper's inevitable glamour. I just wanted to look like myself, quiet, steady, and unshakable. At the last minute, I slipped the envelope of bank documents into my carry-on bag. I checked 3 times to make sure everything was there, every piece of evidence that proved what I had done. Then I zipped the bag closed and tried to sleep. Sleep did not come easily. I lay in the dark, replaying memories from my childhood. The awards no one came to see. The birthdays that felt like afterthoughts. The constant sense that I was living in the margins of my own family story. Tomorrow, I would finally step into the center of the page, whether they liked it or not. The taxi from the airport pulled up to my childhood home around 4 in the afternoon. I sat in the back seat for a moment, just looking at the house. The same brown roof, now a little more weathered. The same white shutters, though the paint was peeling in places. And there on the side of the house, my mother's garden still blooming with roses and hydrangeas that Diane had faithfully maintained for over 2 decades. This was what I had paid to save. Not the building itself, not the mortgage, not even the memories of my childhood. I had paid to preserve this last living piece of my mother, the garden she had planted with her own hands in the final years of her life. I paid the driver and walked up the familiar path to the front door. Before I could knock, it swung open, and Harper was there wrapping me in an enthusiastic hug, as if we were the closest sisters in the world. Stella, oh my gosh, you actually came. I was not sure you would make it. Come in, everyone is already here. The living room was full of family members I had not seen in years. Aunt Lydia was perched on the old floral sofa, deep in conversation with Uncle Gerald. Aunt Martha was helping Diane set the table in the dining room. Blake stood awkwardly by the fireplace, nursing a beer and nodding along to something Cousin Nathan was saying. And there was Dad sitting in his favorite armchair, looking older than I remembered. His hair had gone almost completely gray, and there were deep lines around his eyes that I had not noticed before. But when he saw Harper leading me into the room, his face lit up with that familiar warmth, that softness I had spent my whole life trying to earn. Girls, he said, both my girls are here. This is perfect. I hugged him briefly, feeling the familiar disconnect between what I wanted this moment to be and what it actually was. He held me for maybe 2 seconds before turning back to Harper, asking if she needed help with anything, if Blake was getting enough to eat. Dinner was served at 6. Diane had prepared Dad's favorite meal, roast chicken, with rosemary mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and a chocolate cake she had baked from scratch. The dining table was extended to its full length, covered with Mom's old lace tablecloth, set with the good china that only came out for special occasions. I sat near the end of the table between Aunt Lydia and Cousin Nathan. Harper and Blake had the seats of honor closest to Dad. Throughout the meal, I watched and listened as the family showered Harper with praise. Aunt Martha kept saying how blessed we all were to have such a generous soul in the family. Uncle Gerald toasted to Harper's business acumen, joking that maybe her next venture would be a bank, since she clearly knew how to handle money. Everyone laughed except me. I ate my chicken and smiled at the right moments, and felt the envelope in my bag pressing against my leg like a heartbeat. After dessert, Dad stood up and clinked his fork against his wine glass. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, he began. 63 years old. Never thought I would make it this far, especially not after losing Margaret. He paused, his voice catching slightly at the mention of my mother's name. But I am still here, and I am surrounded by the people I love. And that is because of family. That is because of this house. And that is because of Harper. He turned to look at my sister, his eyes glistening with emotion. 6 months ago, we almost lost everything. The bank was going to take our home. The place where your mother lived, where we raised our girls, where so many memories were made. I did not know what to do. I felt like a failure. Harper reached out and took his hand, playing her part with practiced perfection. But then my daughter stepped up. Dad continued. Harper and Blake sacrificed everything. They borrowed from friends, they sold their wedding ring, they did whatever it took to save this family. And because of them, we are still here. We still have this home. He raised his glass. To Harper, the hero of this family. Everyone raised their glasses and cheered. Harper dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, graciously accepting the praise. Blake looked uncomfortable but said nothing. I set my glass down without drinking. When the cheers subsided, I stood up slowly. The movement caught Dad's attention, and he looked at me with mild surprise as if he had forgotten I was even there. I kept my voice calm and steady. Dad, I have a question. He blinked. What is it, Stella? I smiled the same pleasant smile I had worn my entire life whenever my family overlooked me. If Harper saved the house, if she is the one who paid off the mortgage, then who sent $100,000 directly to the bank 2 months ago, the room went completely silent. I watched as the color drained from Harper's face. Blake's eyes widened in confusion. Aunt Lydia's mouth fell open. Dad stood frozen, his wine glass still raised halfway to his lips. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope. I placed it gently on the table. This is the wire transfer confirmation from my bank account to your mortgage lender. This is the email from the bank confirming receipt of payment. And this is my account statement showing the withdrawal. I looked directly at my father. $100,000. Every penny I saved over the past 5 years. I did not tell anyone because I did not need thanks or credit. But I also will not stand here and watch someone else claim my sacrifice as their own. Harper's careful composure shattered. She burst into tears, but these were not the graceful tears of a humble hero. These were the tears of someone caught in a lie with nowhere to hide. Why do you always have to make everything about yourself? She shouted at me. This is Dad's birthday. You could not just let him have this one night. I kept my gaze steady. This has never been about me, Harper. That is exactly the point. You have been taking credit for something you did not do, something I did because you knew no one would question you, because you knew Dad would believe anything you told him. The family members looked back and forth between us like spectators at a tennis match. Aunt Martha seemed ready to defend Harper, but even she could not argue with physical documentation. Uncle Gerald picked up one of the bank statements and examined it closely, his expression darkening. Dad finally lowered his wine glass. His hand was shaking. That is, he stammered, that cannot be right. Harper said she and Blake handled everything. I did, Harper insisted, her voice rising in desperation. I mean, I thought the money must have come from somewhere else too. There was probably insurance or something. I did not know Stella was involved at all. The lie was so transparent that even Blake, her ever-supportive husband, turned to look at her with something like disgust. I did not come here to destroy anyone, I said, and I meant it. I came here because I wanted to see my family. But I will not pretend that what happened did not happen. Dad, you can believe whatever you want to believe. You have been doing that my whole life. But the truth is in those papers. The truth has always been there. You just never bothered to look. The silence that followed my revelation was heavier than any noise could have been. I watched my father's face cycle through emotions, confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally something that looked almost like shame. Almost, but not quite. He picked up the bank documents with trembling hands, reading through them slowly. I could see his lips moving as he parsed the numbers, the dates, the account information. When he finally looked up, his eyes did not meet mine. Instead, they fixed on some point in the middle distance, as if he was looking at something none of us could see. Why did you not tell me? He asked quietly. I took a breath before answering. Because I did not do it for recognition, Dad. I did it for Mom. I did it for her garden, for the house where she lived her last days. I did it because despite everything, I still love this family. Even when this family does not love me back. That is not, Dad started, then stopped. His face reddened, but I could not tell if it was from embarrassment or anger. You should have told me. You should have come to me first, instead of letting me stand up there and make a fool of myself. There it was. Even now, even with the truth laid bare in black and white, his first concern was how this made him look. Not what Harper had done. Not the years of favoritism. Not my sacrifice. Just his pride. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You are right, Dad. I should have told you. The same way you should have come to my awards ceremonies. The same way you should have noticed when I put myself through college without asking for a single dollar. The same way you should have really seen me at some point in the last 32 years. Harper tried to interject, her voice high and defensive. This is ridiculous. Stella is just jealous. She has always been jealous of me. She is trying to ruin Dad's birthday because she cannot stand that I am the one who gets attention. I turned to face my sister for the first time since dropping my truth bomb. Actually, Harper, I am not jealous. I used to be when I was younger, before I understood what was really happening. But now I just feel sorry for you. You have spent your entire life taking from other people, from Dad, from friends, from me, and you have convinced yourself that you deserve it all, that the world owes you something. But it does not. And someday there is not going to be anyone left to bail you out. Aunt Lydia, who had been silent throughout this confrontation, suddenly cleared her throat. She looked at Harper with an expression I had never seen before. Disappointment. Harper, she said slowly, is what Stella is saying true? Did you really tell everyone that you paid off the mortgage when you knew or should have known that you did not? I did not know, Harper insisted. But her voice cracked. The bank said it was paid, and Blake and I had been talking about trying to help, so I just assumed that somehow our efforts worked. What efforts? Aunt Martha asked, her voice sharp. You told me you sold your engagement ring. Blake, is Harper still wearing her engagement ring? All eyes turned to Harper's left hand. There, glittering under the dining room lights, was the same diamond ring Blake had given her 2 years ago. Still on her finger, still unsold. Harper quickly put her hand behind her back, but it was too late. The damage was done. I think Uncle Gerald said slowly, we all owe Stella an apology. And I think we need to have a serious conversation about what has been happening in this family for a very long time. No, I said, and everyone turned to look at me. I do not need an apology. Not from any of you. What I needed was to tell the truth, and I have done that. What you all do with that truth is up to you. I looked at my father one last time. I love you, Dad. I have always loved you. And I have spent my entire life hoping that someday you would love me back the same way you love Harper. But I am done waiting. I am done hoping. I did what I did because it was the right thing to do, not because I thought it would finally make you see me. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. Stella, wait, Diane called out. She stood up from her chair, her hands twisting nervously. Richard, she said, turning to my father, I need to say something. Everyone looked at her in surprise. Diane, who never raised her voice. Diane, who always kept the peace. Diane, who had been invisible in her own way for as long as I had been invisible in mine. I have watched this family for over 20 years, she said, her voice trembling but determined. I have watched you favor Harper at every turn. I have watched Stella work harder than any child should have to work just to get a fraction of the attention you gave her sister freely. I stayed quiet because I thought it was not my place to interfere. But today, Stella showed me something. She showed me that staying silent when you see injustice is the same as being part of it. And I will not be silent anymore. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I am sorry, Stella. I am sorry I did not speak up sooner. I am sorry I let you feel alone for so long. I felt my own eyes burning, but I blinked back the tears. Thank you, Diane. That means more than you know. I walked out of the house without looking back. The flight home felt like it lasted forever. I sat in my window seat staring out at the clouds below, replaying the evening in my mind. I had done it. I had finally said everything I had been holding inside for 3 decades. And now, for better or worse, the truth was out. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vindicated. Mostly, I just felt tired. Tired and strangely empty. Halfway through the flight, the tears finally came. Not loud sobs, just a quiet stream down my cheeks that I did not bother to wipe away. I was not crying because I was sad. I was crying because I was finally letting go of a weight I had been carrying my entire life. 2 days after I returned to Seattle, Diane called me. I almost did not answer, still feeling raw from everything that had happened, but something made me pick up. Your father has been very quiet, she said. He has not talked about what happened. Not to me, not to anyone. Harper and Blake left the morning after the party. They have not called. I nodded even though she could not see me. That sounds about right. But Stella, Diane continued. I want you to know something. What you did at that dinner, it changed something. Maybe not for your father, at least not yet, but for me. And I think maybe for some of the others too. Sometimes the truth needs to be spoken out loud before people can really hear it. I thanked her for calling and hung up. Then I sat in my apartment looking around at the life I had built for myself. My cozy space, my comfortable furniture, my shelves lined with books and achievements and memories that had nothing to do with my family. This was my home now. This was my life. And for the first time, I realized that I did not need my father's approval to make it meaningful. The months after the birthday dinner were some of the hardest of my life. During the days, I threw myself into work with even more intensity than usual. I took on extra projects, volunteered for difficult assignments, stayed late at the office until the cleaning crew arrived. Anything to keep my mind occupied, to keep the thoughts from creeping in. But at night alone in my apartment, I could not escape them. I dreamed about the house in Ohio, about my mother's garden, about the look on my father's face when I asked that question. Sometimes I dreamed that he apologized, that he held me, and told me he was sorry for all the years of neglect. Those were the worst dreams, because waking up from them felt like losing him all over again. Marcus noticed that something was wrong. He started showing up at my apartment with takeout containers and bad movies, staying until late to make sure I was not alone with my thoughts. He never pushed me to talk about what happened, just sat beside me on the couch, offering silent solidarity. One night after we had finished a truly terrible action film, he turned to me with a serious expression. "Have you thought about talking to someone?" he asked. "A professional, I mean. What you went through at that dinner. What you have been through your whole life, that is a lot to process on your own." I shrugged. "I have thought about it, but talking to a stranger about my family issues feels strange. Like I am betraying them somehow. You are not betraying anyone by taking care of yourself, Stella. You have spent 32 years putting everyone else first. Maybe it is time to prioritize your own well-being." He was right, of course. Marcus was usually right about these things. So the following week, I made an appointment with a therapist named Dr. Reeves, a kind woman with gray-streaked hair and a soothing voice that made me feel safe. The first session was awkward. I did not know where to start, how much to share, how to explain the complicated dynamics of my family without sounding bitter or self-pitying. Dr. Reeves just listened, nodding occasionally, letting me find my own way through the story. By the third session, something started to shift. Dr. Reeves helped me see patterns I had never recognized before. The way I had learned to make myself small to avoid conflict. The way I had internalized the message that my worth depended on what I could do for others. The way I had spent my whole life seeking validation from people who were incapable of giving it. "You are not responsible for your father's inability to love you equally," she said one afternoon. "That is his failure, not yours. And you are not obligated to keep waiting for him to change." Those words hit me harder than I expected. I had always believed somewhere deep inside that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, sacrificed enough, someday my father would finally see me. But Dr. Reeves was right. His inability to love me was not something I could fix. It was something I had to accept and move past. Slowly, I started rebuilding my life. Not from scratch, but from a new foundation. I started saying yes to social invitations I would have declined before. I joined a hiking group through work and spent my weekends exploring the mountains around Seattle with people who quickly became friends. I adopted a cat named Winston, a grumpy orange tabby who demanded attention on his own terms but always curled up beside me at night. My colleague Priya became one of my closest friends. She had a similar background, immigrant parents who pushed her relentlessly while favoring her older brother. We bonded over shared experiences and supported each other through the ongoing process of healing from family wounds. My neighbors, an elderly couple named Frank and Gloria, adopted me as a sort of surrogate granddaughter. They invited me over for Sunday dinners, taught me to play cards, and never asked about my family beyond the basics. With them, I could just be Stella, not the forgotten daughter or the invisible sister, just myself. Around 6 months after the birthday dinner, I started calling Diane regularly. Every Sunday afternoon, we would talk for an hour or more. She told me about the garden, about the house, about the small dramas of small-town life. She never mentioned Harper, and I never asked. But one Sunday she brought up my father. "He has been different," she said carefully, quieter. "Sometimes I catch him looking at old photo albums, the ones with pictures of you as a child. He has not apologized, and I am not sure he knows how. But something is happening inside him, Stella. Something is changing." I did not know how to feel about that. Part of me wanted to hope, wanted to believe that maybe after all these years my father was finally starting to see me. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt too many times, was wary of hoping again. "I appreciate you telling me," I said. "But Diane, I need you to understand something. I am not waiting for him anymore. I spent too many years hoping he would change, and it nearly broke me. If he wants a relationship with me, he knows where to find me. But I am not going to chase his love anymore. I have finally learned that I deserve better than that." Diane was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You do deserve better. You always have." About a year after the birthday dinner, I was sitting in my apartment on a quiet Saturday morning drinking coffee and watching Winston chase a sunbeam across the floor. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was my father. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my heart pounding. We had not spoken since that night. No calls, no texts, no communication of any kind. I had assumed he would never reach out, that his pride would prevent him from ever admitting he was wrong. But here was his name glowing on my phone, waiting for me to decide. I answered. "Stella," he said. His voice sounded older, somehow rougher around the edges. "Hi, Dad." There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing, could almost feel him struggling to find the right words. "Happy birthday," he finally said. I blinked. It was indeed my birthday. I had almost forgotten myself, having planned nothing more celebratory than brunch with Priya later that afternoon. "Thank you," I said, unsure what else to say. Another pause. Then "I miss you." I felt something catch in my throat. Those 3 words, so simple, so ordinary for most families, but almost miraculous coming from him. "I miss you too, Dad." He cleared his throat. "I have been thinking a lot this year, about you, about Harper, about the kind of father I have been. I am not good at saying these things, Stella. You know that. But I want you to know that I see it now. What I did, how I treated you, it was not fair. It was not right. I waited, not trusting myself to speak. I do not know if you can forgive me," he continued. "I do not know if I deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I am sorry. Not because Diane pushed me to call, not because the family has been talking. I am calling because I have been thinking about you every single day since that dinner, and I realized something. I almost lost you forever, Stella. Not because of the foreclosure, but because of my own blindness. And I could not let another birthday pass without telling you that." I took a deep breath. "Thank you for saying that, Dad. It means a lot. Does that mean you might want to, I do not know, try again, start over?" I thought about everything Dr. Reeves had taught me, everything I had learned about protecting myself, while still leaving room for growth. "I do not know if we can start over," I said honestly. "Too much has happened for that. But maybe we can start fresh. Maybe we can build something new, something better than what we had before. But it has to be real this time, Dad. No more pretending Harper is the only daughter you have. No more overlooking me, because it is easier. If we do this, we do it honestly. I can do that," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to do that." "Then let us try," I said. One conversation at a time. After I hung up the phone, I sat for a long while with Winston in my lap, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. All the pain, all the invisibility, all the years of feeling like I did not matter. And now this unexpected moment of connection, this possibility of healing. I did not know if my father would really change. People rarely do, at least not completely. But I had learned something important over this past year. My happiness did not depend on whether he changed. My worth did not depend on his recognition. I had built a life filled with people who loved me, work that fulfilled me, and a sense of self that no longer needed external validation. If my father and I could repair our relationship, that would be wonderful. But if we could not, I would still be okay. Because I had finally learned to love myself the way I had always wanted him to love me. And that, in the end, was the most important thing of all. If you are watching this and you have ever felt invisible in your own family, I want you to know something. Your value is not determined by whether the people who should love you actually see you. You are worthy of love and respect simply because you exist. Do not spend your whole life waiting for someone else to recognize that. Recognize it yourself. I would love to hear from you. Have you ever been the one who sacrificed everything while someone else took the credit? How did you handle it? Leave a comment below and share your story. And if this video resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next story. Thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for listening to my journey. I hope that wherever you are, whatever you are going through, you find the strength to stand in your truth and the peace that comes from knowing your own worth. Take care of yourselves. You matter more than you know.